Let your clients do your drafting. How's that for an idea? With Tucker Cottingham, episode 160. Are you ready to make your law firm a profit-generating machine that will free up your time and skyrocket your impact? With more than 2 decades of business growth experience and having proven that you can be successful while prioritizing your family and your impact, introducing the Profit with Law podcast. I am your host, the creator of the Firm Differentiator 10X Effect, Moshe Amsel. Well, hello and welcome to another great episode here on the Profit with Law podcast. I'm your host, Moshe Amsel. Before I jump into the guest interview that we have today in store for you, and it is a great one, I want to talk to you for a moment about the Law Firm Growth Summit that we have coming up. Now, for my regular listeners, you're probably like rolling your eyes and saying, oh, no, not again. But guess what? You're going to hear about this for the next 2 months. So get used to it. But anyway, if you have not got your tickets yet, why the heck not? Let me tell you something. Today, you're going to learn about what Tucker and his company are doing, Loya, and this is the kind of example of what you need to think about as far as how you position your business model to take advantage of technologies like what we're going to highlight today. And I don't want to spoil the episode, but I am going to tell you that if your business model doesn't match, if you're running with the typical age-old bill by the hour business model, you're not going to make it in the long run. Now, there are exceptions. If you're doing just litigation and, there's no way to predict the time, then you might be needing to do the hourly billable model. But other than that, almost every attorney should be doing some sort of value-based pricing, flat fee pricing, or something like that, something predictable for their client. And when you do that, it opens up a whole world of possibility of how you can have different avenues that will allow you to either make money a different way or will allow you to streamline the process so that you are more efficient, meaning you can serve more clients, meaning the amount that you're earning per hour goes up exponentially without you needing to raise your rates because you're getting paid for the entire engagement. So I think this is one of the core concepts that we're going to be leading with at the Law Firm Growth Summit. I mean, essentially, the entire event is about how to position your law firm for future success, how to be relevant in the future, and not just today, but also how to be relevant today. In other words, how do you build a business that is not only profitable today, but is also prepared to take advantage of the things that are coming and to be ready for the wave of the future. The legal industry is undergoing a fundamental shift. If I had told you a year ago that there are going to be courts across the United States that are going to be allowing virtual hearings and conducting business remotely and allowing you to communicate with their, sending emails, sending DocuSigned documents over, stuff like that, you would have looked at me like I had 2 heads on. But the reality is that COVID has accelerated what was going to happen anyway. It's a fundamental shift. It would have happened. It just might have taken another 10 years. So thank you, COVID. At least there's one positive thing from this whole thing, and that is that the legal industry is changing way faster than anybody anticipated. And we need to play catch up. We need to get ahead of it, and we need to start to anticipate what's next because there are going to be other accelerants. There are going to be other things that move the needle. And this event that we're running, it's a 3-day virtual event. We are focused on creating an in-person conference experience in a virtual environment as best as we can. And we're focused on bringing you the world's best experts, leaders, industry leaders in the legal industry to highlight all of what is working, what isn't working, how do you anticipate the future, how do you position yourself, what is the business model you should be running with. We're going to answer all those questions over 3 days, February 9th to 11th. I hope to see you there. Go to lawfirmgrowthsummit.com, lawfirmgrowthsummit.com. You want to grab your tickets now. Why do you not want to wait? Well, that's because the price goes up Every single week, the price is going up. You do not want to wait. You don't want to pay twice as much for your ticket on the first week of February. You want to buy it now. Super discounted rate. It's early bird, early bird. Price goes up Monday. So go to lawfirmgrowsummit.com. And guess what? Here's that interview. Joining me today is Tucker Cottingham from Loya. And I'm really excited to talk to Tucker today because Loya is doing something different. And it's very much in line with a lot of the things we've been talking about here on the podcast. And I'm excited to dive into that conversation with him and talk about how it's helping law firms, how it and how law firms might be afraid of what they're doing and what we're doing to address that. So I'm super excited to get into the deep content and the deep conversation here with you. But before we do that, I got a couple of messages for you. First of all, if this is your first time listening to the show and you enjoy this episode, make sure that before you leave, you hit the subscribe button. We'd love to have you back. We're here twice a week, every Tuesday and Thursday. And I'd love to be in your ears. I'd love to have this conversation with you, and I'd love your feedback. In the show notes to this episode is how you can follow up with us on social, how you can follow up with us by email, how you can get in touch with us, and just click those links and let's open that conversation. Let me give you the official bio for Tucker, and we'll welcome him to the show. Tucker is an attorney and the founder and CEO of Loya, a modern document workflow solution for small and medium-sized law firms, and is the trusted solution for more than 1,000 law firms across North America. Before Loya, Tucker helped build and manage one of the top-rated transactional law firms in San Francisco, is currently on the board of the American Bar Association's Legal Technology Resource Center and Professional Development Division. Tucker, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me, Moshe.
It's my absolute pleasure. So Tucker, I always start with an easy one, and that's, hey, some people listening to the show, and probably most of them, never heard of you before. So give us a little bit of your backstory. How'd you get into law? And then what made you decide, it sounds from the bio that you left or either you sold your firm or you closed it or you left your firm and started Loya. So what made you decide to do that and make that transition into a legal tech company? And, just kind of give us some flavor into this journey that you took.
Yeah, absolutely. So how I got into law is kind of interesting. I did not grow up with any lawyers in my family. Originally from Louisville, Kentucky, and I went to college in Ohio. And in college, I actually worked with individuals with disabilities, and specifically, we were kind of in a rural part of Ohio, Kenyon College. And what I noticed really quickly was that a lot of these people had benefits that were technically available to them, but they didn't have good advocates, and so they weren't able to actually get access to those benefits. Moved out to California after college through a happenstance kind of thing, ended up working at the Bridge School, which is a school that Neil Young started for kids with cerebral palsy. And those kids had really great advocates for the most part, and were able to access a lot of really impressive equipment. And I just kind of realized the power of being able to really just to help people sort of untangle some of these more complicated things and the impact that could make on people's lives. And so applied to law school and started out then in litigation for a couple years, and transitioned to transactional practice that I started with another friend of mine. The practice is actually still going. Ben Law Group's doing great, fantastic transactional firm. And yeah, I think the reason that I started Loya was really because, we were doing really well as a firm in terms of having a lot of clients coming through the door. But we had sort of reached a ceiling in terms of our efficiency. And so what I realized was that, I was spending the vast majority of my time with documents on the same 30 different documents, different variations for each client, but essentially the same, sort of 30 documents over and over again. And I just didn't really see an end road. I just sort of looked into the future and thought to myself, I'm going to be doing these same things over and over again for years, because I just can't. It was really hard to delegate things. I got into a place where it just became faster for me to do the work than to actually explain to a paralegal or an associate or junior associate, how to do the different projects. I was writing the same information across multiple documents. And the sort of the administrative aspects of our firm were just taking a lot of my time. And really what I wanted to be doing was, spending more time with my clients and understanding their issues, like an issue spot, more work and being out in the world and kind of networking and spending time with my family. And it just felt to me that I couldn't imagine a future of the legal industry without modern document automation. We were in San Francisco, so I was seeing all this technology, and I couldn't believe that you couldn't, essentially send a logic-based questionnaire to somebody and have that, generate a first draft of your set of documents. And so, set into that, talked to a bunch of other attorneys and colleagues. Seemed like most of my other small firm lawyers were doing the same thing. They were spending a lot of time with the same documents. They knew them really well, but they had kind of maxed out in terms of efficiencies and in terms of the documents and document workflows. And so joined together with a friend and started Lawyaw.
It's pretty incredible that, if we look at legal tech, that's pretty much how, like, probably 80% of legal tech began is, an attorney had an issue, couldn't find a solution, and either had to build their own solution or, decided to start a company to build it. So, it's very interesting to see how you got there, but there's a gazillion attorneys out there that are struggling with the same issue, right? And why do you think that you took the bull by the horns and said, hey, I'm going to do something about this, and everyone else is just kind of like living with the issue?
I don't know exactly, honestly. I've always been interested in starting businesses and starting things and sort of having an idea about something and trying to make it into something real. That's just one of the most exciting things that I can think about. I think when you bring really smart, motivated people together, the things that we're capable of doing as humans together is really unbelievable. If you look at a lot of the technology advancements. And so, I always kind of feel like things are possible, and then it's just sort of, what does it take to do that? So, but I'm not exactly sure.
No, that's a great answer, because what it highlights is that you're an entrepreneur through and through, right? And that's the funny thing is that a lot of law firm owners are not entrepreneurs, right? You started your law firm because you had, you wanted to solve a pain point that you were having, which might be that you didn't like working for somebody else, or you had some specific area of law you wanted to focus on, or you wanted to have unlimited potential from your law firm. But a true entrepreneur looks at every opportunity as an opportunity, and then, sometimes stakes their future on that opportunity. So it just speaks to your character. And I have this theory that the true entrepreneurs get their law firms to success way faster than the attorney who opens a law firm, because of all those other motivating factors. But they're not really coming at it from an opportunity point of view, an opportunity mindset. I don't know. I didn't ask you how long it took you to achieve success in your firm, but I'm guessing that your journey was shorter than others to get to that point.
Yeah, we grew pretty quickly. In about 3 or 4 years, we were at several attorneys and more than 7 figures of business. So we were doing well pretty quickly. But I do disagree a little bit, because I agree that I don't think that all lawyers are necessarily entrepreneurs, and a lot of people get into law because it was a family thing, or they were able to, their spouse's family was attorneys and things like this. I do think that one of the core attributes of being a good lawyer is imagining like a different future. And so usually that's a different future for your client, but you're trying to help them achieve something. And so being able to sort of break down, okay, this is an outcome that we want to have, and we need to break those into different steps to get there. And really kind of rationally think through those different things and kind of that chess game. That is a huge part of entrepreneurialism. And, and I think that is the thing that all of our customers probably have in common, is that they can imagine a better way of doing things than they're currently doing. they may not go out and hire the developers and raise money and do all that stuff. But just the fact that you can kind of visualize or think about a better version of what you're doing in your own day, that's kind of all you need, I think, to really be able to effectuate a lot of this positive change in your law firm. And I think most lawyers have that. Maybe I'm more optimistic, but I think that's the case.
So I love this idea that you just presented, which is that lawyers in general, lawyers are always looking for a different outcome or looking at other possibilities of an outcome for their client. And this goes so in line with what we're doing with our messaging here on the podcast, as well as the Law Firm Growth Summit that we have coming up in February, where our theme is to embrace the future, to recognize that the legal profession is intrinsically changing, right? It's been changing for a long time, but it's been changing very slowly. Mm-hmm. And now COVID has accelerated that. Whether it's being able to run a virtual practice, stuff like that, those are like the building blocks, the basic building blocks. But the reality is that looking at the business model as a whole is coming into question. Is billing somebody hourly really a good business model for a law firm? And moving forward, what does that look like if you stick your heels in, you say, no, this is the way it's done, I'm going to bill hourly, and then you then realize that you're at odds with your client at all times when you're in that relationship. And to think about automating document management and document creation is something that it would actually hurt your business, because you're spending less time doing the work, so you can't bill as much, right? Yep. That's a very limited mindset, limited way of thinking, but that's where we're coming from. That's the profession that we're coming from. And we need people to start to look at the future and look at a different possibility for what the legal profession is going to look like in the future, to be able to start to question the entire business model. And I'd like to know from your perspective with your solution, I'm assuming that it fits better into where somebody is charging a flat fee for something, where, that now it's in their best interest to try to get the greatest throughput and productivity possible in their firm, rather than needing to hold on to and owning certain processes.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting point. And I think that we are seeing a huge movement towards more flat rate types of billing structures. But one thing that I think is lost in the conversation a lot is that because you charge flat rate for some things doesn't mean you have to charge flat rate for everything. And so the vast majority of the attorneys on our platform that charge flat rate maybe only do it for a few of their projects that they've really kind of streamlined. And so there's a lot of hybrid billing. There's a lot of capping of billing. I think something like 80% of all lawyers end up having some kind of cap to their billing structure. And so, it's not like a binary thing. It's either flat rate or not flat rate. A lot of times, once you kind of do a project and somebody meets certain criteria, you're starting a new business for somebody. Okay, if you're going to do an LLC, there's a type of LLC that you don't want to do flat rate because it's really complicated and it could get, really messy. But there are certain fact patterns where, they do fit into a sort of, predictable amount of time that you're going to spend on it. And the more experience that attorneys have, the more they're able to kind of see those opportunities. But I think the bigger question really is, the thing that I think is hard for a lot of lawyers in our profession in general is that we're always kind of putting ourselves last. So we're thinking about our clients, and then we're at work too long. So then we're thinking about our families, and then and at the end of the day, I think so many attorneys that I talk with feel like they have, an hour for themselves. Maybe it's in the car, or maybe, they're on phone calls even in the car, and maybe it's at the very end of the night. But essentially, we are helpers. We are advocating for other people. It's in our nature to kind of put other people before us in a lot of ways. And then we individually end up coming last, which I think leads to a lot of the, sort of things behind the curtain being a little bit messier than they seem. And then, really trying to focus on other people's experience. But because of technology, and this is a roundabout way of answering your question, but because of technology, I think that actually is a huge motivator for our customers, because by using these document workflows and by streamlining things, they're really giving their clients a better experience. So, maybe that fits into a flat rate model, maybe that fits into an hourly billing model. But what's natural, I think, for lawyers is trying to think about, okay, what is the competition looking like? What are the options for these clients that are coming and choosing to hire me? And am I giving that client the very best experience? And there's a lot of ways that using technology you can do that, not sending them emails and having them write, really personal, detailed information into the body of an email, or filling out a Microsoft Word document as a questionnaire, or taking 3 weeks to basically turn around, fairly standard documents that you're familiar with, but because you think they're pretty familiar, you keep putting it last on your day, and then next thing you know, 2 weeks has gone by. So I think that when you think about document automation and law yaw specifically, what we're trying to do, and I think we're doing it effectively, is equipping law firms to give their clients the best experience possible. And I think that is actually a very natural mentality. And when you start to do that, then you also start to think about, okay, if I'm paying somebody, do I want to have predictability and transparency in how much I'm paying somebody? Of course, that's what clients want. And so how can we start to, build that into the legal services that attorneys are providing? And it doesn't always have to be flat rate, but that's certainly one way to do it. I think that having the attorneys on our platform that are able to turn around their documents very quickly, but still charge hourly, find that they're able to provide value in different ways, that their clients don't actually want to pay for them always filling out these documents and generating the documents. A lot of times they want the strategic advice or the counseling or the therapy or, the additional issue spotting. And that's where I think at least a lot of our customers and a lot of attorneys and myself, that's the most satisfying part of the job. And so you can still end up spending, time, but maybe that time is spent on the higher value parts of the engagement and filling out the documents.
Yeah, and I love where you just went with this discussion. So first of all, I absolutely agree with you. I don't think that it's flat fee or no flat fee. I think that there's definitely room and place for all of the above. I think you look at a PI firm and contingency is the business model, and there's no there's no flat fee, there's no hourly fee, there's no room for that. But every single practice has a place where it makes sense. You just can't predict, and therefore it makes sense to have an hourly bill, hourly fee for that. But moving away from that to your point, which is client satisfaction, I'm holding the Clio Trends report for 2020 in my hand. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want to highlight a couple of things in the report that are very much in line with what you're saying, as far as what lawyers want and what consumers want. So the first thing I want to point out is that in part 3, where it talks about clients, it's got an analysis of what defines a law firm's success. And basically what they did was they asked attorneys, they said, compare this attribute and this attribute. Which do you think is more likely to define your success? And they did that over 10 different attributes, and they came up with what they call a max diff score. So the top scoring attribute is making clients happy and satisfied. Right. So attorneys know intuitively that is the most important thing for me in running my practice, more than anything else, more than ensuring job security, more than achieving work-life balance, more than ensuring wellness of practice members, more than exceeding last year's revenue, more than hiring more lawyers and staff. Number one is making clients happy and satisfied. So if your product helps make clients happier and more satisfied, then it's a home run, right? It's an easy one for lawyers to do. And why is making clients more happy and satisfied so top of the list? And this, once again, bodes well to understanding how much the industry is changing and also how much it's really stayed the same, right? Historically, lawyers have lived off of referrals, right? But referrals are now coming from a different place. Referrals are no longer coming. I mean, sometimes they're coming from people but lots of referrals are coming from Google. Google is referring you business, right? And what's driving that is your Google reviews. So, at least I'm reading right off the paper, at least part of why legal professionals define their firm's success based on the satisfaction of their clients is because they also view positive referrals and reviews as key drivers of new business. And lawyers are starting to wake up and realize this. And how do you drive good reviews? by making sure and ensuring that your process from beginning to end is entirely based on customer satisfaction. And when you start to look at your relationship with your clients from that lens, then you start to reevaluate everything. And what's important to your clients? Let's go to another one of Clio's, analysis here. They asked people, what makes a lawyer hireable according to you? So according to consumers, what makes a lawyer hireable? Once again, 10 attributes. And, is this a bigger factor or not? Number one, has good reviews and recommendations, right? So the consumer is on the same page as what the lawyer's perception is, right? And then the next three things are offers lower prices, discounts, offers payment plans, offers fixed fees. Why are the next three things all related to the fee structure and what they're paying you? And if we really pull back the curtains and we really look at it, it's because of exactly what you said. They want predictability. Right. They want to know when I come to the table with a legal matter, I want to know, is this worth pursuing? I want to know, do I have the capability of seeing this through to the end? And the biggest problem of the legal industry in the past is, yes, we can try to get you good results. Here's our track record. We're the best person for the job. It's going to cost you X amount per hour. Well, how many hours is it going to take? Well, we can't tell you. Every time is different, right? It's this black hole that you're expecting somebody to step into. And there is no other transaction that occurs in somebody's life where they're entering into something where they have an unlimited amount of expense before they see a result. And they're supposed to enter into that with just trust and faith and hoping for the best. So, getting into this conversation of, okay, how do we create more predictability? How do we create more certainty about what the cost is going to be? Drives directly to, if you can automate something and processize something, then you're able to now start doing that. And I know you're jumping to say something, so go for it.
No, I was just gonna say the other side of that coin is that because of those same dynamics, and I think Cleo reports on this too, but lawyers aren't collecting all the time that they bill. So people are often worried about, I'm going to get burned on a flat rate project. But if you look at the actual amount of time that's billed on a matter and how much is collected from that, lawyers are losing money. I mean, they're collecting less than the time that they bill or record in almost every single engagement, to the point where a lot of attorneys now don't even write down all the time they spend because they know that they're not going to be able to collect it. And even the time that they do write down oftentimes gets negotiated. So I think the thing that what you're saying about the client perspective is super critical and is the driver. But from the attorney perspective, it's not like the hourly billing model is a fantastic model for attorneys. They love sending those invoices and negotiating them and writing off time. I mean, it's not a, just punch your card and get your paycheck type of system. And so, I think that if you're going to try to improve it, certainly doing the thing that's best for the person you're trying to sell your services to makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you. I think, first of all, Clio does address this significantly. So in part 5 of that report, they talk about it. And one of the things that they highlight is exactly what you're saying, which is the discount model. So basically going and discounting your hours, discounting your fee, and lawyers who are listening to this, who are doing this, you're doing it. It's almost like you've created a process in your firm where at the end of the month or at the end of the billing cycle, everyone gets together and every attorney reviews the hours that they have on the bill. And they say, and they go through this process of, should this have taken this long?
Right.
And if not, I'm going to chop off some of the time. Well, it took you that long, right? Are you saying that you're incompetent? Because you're not, right? So if for whatever reason, it took you longer than it normally would for this particular thing, but yet you're chopping off your time. Then on top of that, you're then going and billing the client. The client turns around and says, I can't believe that this is, that you worked this many hours and you're charging me X amount of dollars for the work that was done. And they start getting into this conversation with you of, this is, this bill is too high. And then you're like, your knee-jerk reaction is like, okay, you know what, I'm going to take 25% off. And, and let's call it a day and you can pay your bill and we can all be squared away. And what happens is that effectively you're collecting less. And one of the really interesting points, and I didn't find the right page in the report, so I can't read it off, but one of the really interesting points in the report is that you're probably losing customers in the sales process, in the intake process, when somebody comes and evaluates using you because you were too expensive. But the reality is you showed them the sticker price, right? You didn't
Right.
show them the discounted price. You allowed them to walk out the door without saying, hey, it's $500 an hour, but we end up cutting off hours that we don't bill. We end up, giving you 25% off when you fight with us. So it's really $300 an hour. You're not doing that. So you'd be much better off not doing the discounting, not doing the hour cutting, and either charging a lower hourly rate or coming up with a flat fee that you feel is going to cover you, that's going to, be profitable, and then leading with that instead of doing the discount on the back end, because you're losing sales on the front end. Somebody's going to another firm because you were too expensive, because of your fee structure, because of your practice of discounting. So I think we're going to see more and more law firms waking up to this and realizing that this is a real issue for them. And the other one is accounts receivable, right? When you're billing hourly, you can't pre-bill. So the answer to that is retainers, right? But what happens is that lawyers are afraid, and honestly, it's any business owner. We're always afraid of the financial conversation. We're afraid to go after somebody and collect money that's owed to us. So we punt it, we push it off. And what happens is the longer we wait, the harder it becomes to collect. And what happens is you get somebody to sign that they're going to replenish their retainer at whatever percentage, so when it reaches a threshold, they're going to replenish it to what it's supposed to be, to the max. That's intended to make sure that you're never running after them for money. The money is always there. You invoice them, you pull it from the retainer, and it pays the bill. But what's happening in reality is we're afraid to go and say, hey, your retainer is down to 30%. You need to replenish it. So instead, we let it go down to zero. And then we don't have good checks and balances in the firm for the attorney working on the matter to know this client's out of hours, right? We've used up the retainer. We're now on unpaid hours. So now they work through the month, they add another 100 hours to the matter. And now the client has, first of all, they get sticker shock because you didn't give them the retainer replenishment. So they didn't know that you had already took all that money from them. And then on top of that, they now have another $5,000 they owe you. And now it becomes a contentious relationship. They're unhappy and they're not going to replenish their retainer and pay the invoice at the same time. So at best you get the invoice paid and you're still back at where you started with the retainer not being replenished. It's part of it is an awful model, but part of it is we keep shooting ourselves in the foot because of our own human nature tendencies of not being comfortable in that conversation. So instead, let's look at a different way of doing things.
Yeah, and what's also kind of funny about it is it's not actually a different way of doing things. So the legal industry was flat fee based, that were set. The fees were set by state bars from the time that there were first lawyers until the 1970s. And then in the 70s, there was a Supreme Court case that was essentially an antitrust claim that said that there was no competition because these max fees were set by state bars, and that's what became the default flat rates. And so there was a case in Virginia where, they sued, I think the state bar, and then, went to the Supreme Court and they said, yeah, you can't, this is anti-competitive. And so, all of attorneys, if you look at old, from the early, 20th century, all of the legal services were flat rate. And that was the model for legal services, forever. And then as a sort of knee-jerk reaction to the Supreme Court case, there had to be a quick way to differentiate the pricing of different services. And that's where the hourly rates got introduced. So it's really a fairly modern mechanism that is super flawed because it wasn't particularly well thought out, especially the retainer part. And then you have the trust accounts and you have operating accounts depending on what state you're in. There's all kinds of things that make it a particularly complicated model. But it wasn't the natural organic fit for how legal services were provided for the first 400 years of there being attorneys. So yeah, that's also kind of an interesting thing, is that we're kind of coming back in some ways to kind of a more natural model, which is that people want to know what they're going to pay, try to keep things predictable, and then, create milestones and try to segment it as best as you can.
Tucker, I learned something new today, and I really appreciate the history lesson because I was not aware of that. And it's really insightful to know that was the case. It's kind of like if you ever look at clothing styles, what
Right.
was in the 70s or the 80s is suddenly making a comeback in 2020 or whatever.
Right.
Um,
Right. Right.
it's very interesting how the pendulum swings, and we come back to it. You can look at that with computing as well. We started off with a mainframe computer where there was a main computer that did all the thinking, and then all the endpoints were just dumb terminals. And essentially with cloud-based applications, we're back to doing that, except that it's so much better than it was back then, because we had to move away from it in order to come back to it and have a better model. So I think that if we look at it, the flat fee model as we navigate it today, and as firms start to play with it and implement it, it's going to come back, but it's going to be way better than the one that was there before, which was based off of some sort of somebody setting fees in a back office somewhere and saying, here, this is what you can charge for X. There is one area of law that's still like that, which is bankruptcy law. Where there's a cap on what and this is, I believe, a federal cap across the entire U.S. On what somebody can charge for getting somebody through a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. I think Chapter 13 is not capped. So I don't want to show off my knowledge, which may or may not be correct, but I believe that that's the case with bankruptcy law. So I want to switch gears, because I know you didn't come here to just talk about flat fee versus hourly, and that was not the direction that I thought we would take in our conversation. So I want to circle back to your area of expertise, which is document management, document automation. Describe to me the different practice areas that might benefit from this kind of technology, and give me some use case scenarios that we can kind of understand what it is exactly that you do and how somebody might be able to implement that into their business model.
Yeah, absolutely. So we see attorneys from almost every practice area, but some really great use cases are family law. So that's definitely one of the biggest areas that we see. And all across the U.S. and in other countries now as well. So family law is super high volume from the court's perspective, and so when a lot of people have the same issue, the courts tend to start to standardize the way that they want things to be done, just for logistical purposes. And so you have a lot of kind of similar steps that need to be taken in different cases, even though the facts are really different. So everything from statement of assets and disclosures to petitions for divorce, all of the different letters, custody plans. These are all things that people have made templates for. And what's kind of interesting about LawYaw is that we don't give attorneys the templates. So we don't provide the content. We don't provide the templates off the shelf. When I was an attorney, I never liked that. I always felt like I had my documents. I'd spent a lot of time on them. I thought they were pretty good. And so attorneys bring their documents to our platform and then, build these kind of workflows, these no-code workflows that allow you to populate them. And so we get to talk to attorneys from all different states, and they're looking at the same steps in these practice areas, despite their jurisdictional differences. So family law, estate planning obviously is a huge one. We see a ton of real estate. So particularly New York and other states where there's more kind of attorneys involved in real estate transactions, especially for things like, in Illinois, there's riders, or there's these different kind of things going on in real estate transaction. That's very popular for us. Litigation, a ton of personal injury, right? So like you mentioned, the contingency kind of model is very, very popular. Employment law. And then my background was business law, and that's where I was coming from. And so we have a lot of small business kind of startup type of lawyers who are doing, incorporations, employee handbooks, offer letters, termination packets, option agreements, things like that. I guess one of the interesting, maybe not obvious use cases is discovery. So we have a lot of folks using it for discovery, where they'll have the same kind of, 100 options, and they kind of pick and choose from the menu in terms of the different discovery motions, both propounding and responding. So yeah, it really spans a lot of areas. And I think the commonality is really once somebody has enough experience in what they're doing, then it can be streamlined. And so we have some people doing, tax abatement in specific counties in, Pennsylvania, for instance. There's just these kind of really obscure niche areas that they've honed in on and been able to kind of make a streamlined workflow out of. So it's pretty interesting, but definitely some of the top, family law, estate planning, litigation.
I love the breadth of availability that you have, but I'm curious, like, what is the divide between an attorney having access to this and giving access to this to the consumer? Like, why does an attorney need to be involved in the process for many of these things? For example, let's say that I'm doing a real estate transaction, right?
Mhm.
Can't I just put in the inputs and have the contract come out? Like, why am I going through an attorney for this, as opposed to as a consumer, or I'm in this right now. I'm working with my father-in-law on some real estate investment transactions, and we're back and forth with the attorney on this document, which clearly was done manually. It's they've taken a boilerplate. There's cross offs on it. There's it's clearly the practice that they're using. Couldn't we turn this into a legal Zoom kind of thing where I just was able to go in and create a contract for myself? And is that vision something that scares your clients? Like, where do you think we're going with that?
Yeah, so I think that's a super good question, really, really good question. And I'm of the opinion that we are super far away from removing lawyers from the legal practice. I think that there are so many small little things that come up that people want to know. I mean, if you're doing an LLC as a consumer and you're saying, okay, is this member managed or is this manager managed? People don't know what that means. So, you can help explain it to them, and but people are just going to have a lot of questions. They want the advice, they want the counsel of a lawyer for a lot of things, for the vast majority, I think, of things. Now there are definitely customers of ours that want to kind of make it more friendly for the client, but they're still in the loop. And so, like, for instance, the most common way to use kind of our questionnaire feature is that the client submits the information and then the attorney actually can review it, and they talk to their client. They go through and say, okay, here you said you didn't know the answer to this, or here you said TBD, or you left this blank, and let's go through it. And then they can kind of adjust it and then turn around the documents. But we're getting a lot closer to being able to, you can do conditional logic. So you can say, okay, if they answer this, then this paragraph comes in. And I guess the way that most of our customers use it, the thing that I hear from them is that there are certain things that they need from the client in terms of information, but then there's a separate sort of set of questions that somebody with legal expertise needs to answer. And so there are certain triggers. What type of acceleration is this? There's certain legal questions that essentially the lawyer is checking off or making the decisions about. And we're really trying to focus as much of the attorney's time on those substantive legal questions. And they just come up in a lot of the projects that are on our platform. So I think you can get closer to that, but I don't think that there's a world in our lifetime where lawyers are not a critical part of our society and businesses and everything.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I certainly am not trying to remove lawyers from the practice, but I do think that we need to start thinking that way. I think that we need to start recognizing where is our value add and what can be taken over by technology, and start to build our practice around that. Right? If doing this transactional work, is not really where my expertise is needed, then maybe I need to start embracing that and really charging for something else, and building my practice around that so that I am ready when this does happen. Right.
I totally agree with you there. And I think that, to your point, like our business is divisive for that reason, right? Like people do think I'm going to keep doing what I've been doing. It's been working for me. I'm going to, cling, sort of white knuckle it and cling to what I've been doing. And it does offend people that something that they previously had to do manually can now be, automated or streamlined. And that's kind of been the case with every industry. So there's no doubt that it's going in that direction, and that the most kind of advanced users are using it to do some really cool stuff like what you're talking about. Yeah, and so I guess that there's just levels of complexity that I think are go up pretty high in terms of headroom, but certainly it's moving up, right? The things that can be streamlined and kind of not totally self-serve, but the things that the lawyers can offer that are mostly streamlined to their clients, that scope is dramatically increasing. And when you look around at what other people are doing, there's going to be people that sort of get on the bus or don't, I guess. And
Right.
It's a massive competitive edge. I mean, one of the things I love about what you're doing is you're kind of priming people to have these conversations, because if you think about it from a certain perspective, it's a huge competitive edge, right? You've got more time, you're making more money, you're giving a better client experience. And what that competes with is sort of changing the way that you've done things. And so, it's not for everybody.
Right,
Yes.
and once the client base starts to warm up to the fact that this is out there, right?
Yeah.
If you don't have it, you're toast, right? You go, if they're going to choose who they're going to work with based on their adoption of technology, not because somebody's writing a Google review saying, "Hey, this firm is so cutting edge. They use all this tech and everything was." They're gonna write a review and say, the process was so seamless. I barely had to talk to somebody and everything was done, and it was done quickly. I couldn't believe that I had this turned around in 24 hours. And, those are the things that are going to show up in the review, but they're happening because of what the technology is allowing you to do, which is amazing. I'm curious, is anybody using this in a, Etsy shop kind of way? Like, okay, here, you come to my website and, if you want this, a simple, real estate contract done, click this button, pay me $1,000. It's going to include the contract preparation and 1 hour review and a 30-minute phone call. Right. And, instead of the full legal service, which might cost you $3,000 or whatever it is. And they click the button and self-serve themselves through the process until the point where the attorney reviews it. Is anybody looking at it in that way, doing it in that way, or are we not there yet?
Yeah, we do have people that are starting to do that. Interestingly, when we started LawYaw, we started working with legal aid organizations. And so we've done a ton of work on expungements and different types of work with legal aid. And once COVID hit, a lot of these legal aid organizations couldn't interact with their populations in person. And so we work with, I think 90-something% of all the LSC funded legal aids in California, and a bunch of them across the country. And so they've been really streamlining. So for eviction defense, for different types of immigration issues, we just did a webinar this past week with a bunch of executive directors from legal aid who kind of talked about how they're using LawYaw. And it's very similar to what you're talking about. Now, there are a smaller subset of private attorneys who are thinking like you and asking us for that, and even including, putting the questionnaire on different buttons on their websites, and they are building those workflows. And it's kind of interesting. When we started, LawYaw was almost like a secret weapon for lawyers. Like, they didn't even necessarily talk about it, but they were, cranking stuff out and getting a lot of value out of it. Then they slowly sort of started asking us, can we send this for signature to our client just directly once it's generated? Oh, why are we getting the information from the client over the phone? Can we get a questionnaire? And now we're getting the, can I make it easy to host on our website? Can somebody just go through this and pay us and download it if they meet these criteria? So definitely that workflow aspect is something that, I totally think is part of the future. And we have some innovative law firms that are further along on that than others. But yeah, totally. LawYaw is very well suited for that kind of application. Absolutely.
Awesome. What excites me the most about this is you start to think of the possibility, and the potential is unlimited. It's really like, it's a game changer. And, we might not be there yet, but you can start to see that this is where we're going. And you can start, I had a podcast episode that I did. I I did a couple of them recently. One was where I went through the Clio Trends report. I'm pulling up my podcast player now to see which one is the best one to refer to. Maybe I'll grab one, maybe I won't. But I've been having this conversation. We've been talking about these possibilities of the looking at where this is going and really setting yourself up for the future, and to make this to really embrace the fact that this is happening. And the people who are willing to embrace it, the people who are willing to look at it and say, hey, what is possible? What else can I do? How else can I make this, easier? That's going to be a huge driver of business. It's first to market, and people, consumers are doing this stuff at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
They're not calling you.
Yeah.
If they land on your website and they can click a couple of buttons and answer a questionnaire that'll take them 20 minutes, and now they don't have to deal with it competing with their job during the day and whatever else is going on, and it's done, that's going to be where you're going to win out, and you're going to win out, and you're going to win out, and you're just going to get market share, and you're just going to become the leading lawyer for that thing in that area.
Yeah, and it's amazing. I mean, there's 46 million people a year, I think, that go to court. There's 52 million traffic tickets, right? There's a ton of people that are interacting with, legal issues, and there's a huge percentage of people that don't hire lawyers. Something like 70% of people that have a legal issue don't end up hiring a lawyer. So the other interesting part to me is that as we go down that path, and sort of these forward-thinking lawyers start making that more convenient for clients, the amount of people that are going to be able to access your services is going to greatly expand. And the way I think about it is, just an easy lens is what's most convenient for the client. If something is truly really complicated and you can't give them a high quality, work product at the end of the day, that's ultimately less convenient for the client. But if you could do that and maintain quality, which under certain fact patterns, certain projects you can, then it's pretty easy to imagine. I mean, we look at every industry and we kind of see that convenience is king, right? We want to call a car on our phone. We want to have food delivered. We want to, schedule a flight. Like, these are all things that that have been sort of bent towards the convenience of the consumer. And I don't think there's any question that that's the direction the legal services is going in. So, and then I would, just to your other point about sort of, we're seeing this happen. I think about a couple weeks ago, we had our 1 millionth document drafted on Lawyer. And
wow.
So, yeah, that was a really big milestone for us. We were at 50,000 documents not that long ago. So, we've been growing really quickly, and it's just fascinating to see how many people are coming around to this, and this idea of competitive advantage and sort of embracing what's, these trends. I think that right now is especially a motivating time for people when they're personally really strapped. They see all these changes happening, and the solutions exist for them to sort of realize that. So I'm super excited about it. I think it's going to be a really exciting next couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you, and I'm excited as well. Unfortunately, COVID did what it did, but it's been a really, really exciting thing to watch how rapidly technology got adopted over the last 6 months. And, I've been using Zoom for 5 years, but all of a sudden everybody's on Zoom. Right. And it's not just, it's not just adaption within the industry, but my 5-year-old knows how to use Zoom,
right,
and knows how to control a Zoom session, knows how to log in, knows how to change his name, knows how to mute himself, knows that,
right.
And it's that kind of stuff that, like, this is, the next gen. How are you going to serve the next generation, right?
Right.
People are turning 20 now. People are turning 20 10 years from now. They're going to start to have legal issues. How are they going to expect to be served? And how are you going to serve them? Start asking these questions, and it's going to change what we do and how we do it. And I love what you're doing. I think it's just the tip of the iceberg. I think there's so much more potential. And that's why I love having these conversations. And Tucker, we're just about out of time, so we can keep going for days, because I love this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
but I want to do two things. Number one, I'd like you to leave with with a nugget for our listeners. So if you can think back to either your experience as a law firm owner or as an attorney, or to your experience in running Loya, starting it, getting to where you are, or interacting with your customers, what's one piece of advice, takeaway, something that you can share with our listeners that that you'd like them to hear today, that if it's the right thing for them to hear, that this can really alter the direction of where they're going. And then after that, if you can share with us what is the best next step for somebody to take if they want to learn more about Loya or they want to follow up with you, and share that with us as well.
Sure. Yeah, thank you for having me. First of all, it's been great. I love these kind of conversations as well, and I love the stuff that you're doing.
Thank you.
I think so a nugget of information. I guess I can say that the most successful attorneys that we see and talk with think about their work in terms of projects. So that's something that was not super obvious to me when I started practicing law. But the folks, so we have well over 1,000 law firms and many thousands of attorneys, and the people that really get a ton of value from Loya and have really successful practices sort of think about their work in terms of projects. And so that could be different phases of a case or different phases of an engagement, but they're able to kind of compartmentalize and segment the different parts of their work, and then really think about the processes and efficiencies there. And I think that makes what seems to be a very kind of unpredictable, chaotic thing very manageable and digestible, and it allows you to start kind of packaging it in ways that are more convenient for their clients. So that would be one kind of nugget, is this idea of just sort of segmenting your work and thinking about what you're doing in terms of projects or in terms of units. That's a little bit abstract, but there's a bunch of case studies, and I guess this is a good segue because if you want to learn more, you can come to our website, lawyaw.com, lawyaw.com, and we have a resources tab with a bunch of case studies. So we have all of the how different family law lawyers are actually using Loya to streamline their practice, and these are attorneys that are no different than you, so they're figured out how to make it work and across different practice areas. And then there's also a ebook. I wasn't planning on mentioning this, but the reason I know that little history tidbit is because we made an ebook on alternative fee arrangements, and it has a little bit of the history in there. So people that are interested about that, we went through and kind of put together some stuff. So I'd say go to the website. You can set a time to talk with us. You can check out the product and look at the way that some other law firms have been really successful with it. And yeah, that'd be great. We're more than happy to talk to anybody that's interested in this, even if it's just to have a conversation.
Awesome. Tucker, this has been a great conversation. And what I love about your nugget is I've been trying to describe to people who are like, no, I can't do flat fee or value-based pricing because there's too many unknowns in the entire engagement with the client, that there's no way for me to do that. And what I've been trying to get them to do is to recognize that you can break the work up into phases.
Yes.
And if you look at phase one, every client has to go through that phase one, right? Every client has to go through that initial thing. If you're looking at family law, right? Even if it's a contested divorce, you got to first figure out what are you in agreement on, and what are you at odds on? And maybe we get an initial, agreement drafted up that we at least can come to some sort of agreement on, and then we've identified the sticking points, and that's phase one, right? And if you break it up into phases, suddenly you can start to see where there's pockets where you can tell somebody in a sales or conversation with them, which we don't lawyers don't call it sales, which is a whole other topic that we can talk about. But in an intake conversation, you're talking to a potential client and you're saying, hey, it's going to cost you $20,000 to get divorced. That's the end of the conversation. They're going to go and try to find somebody cheaper, right? But if you say, hey, it's going to cost you $2,500 to get this first phase done, and then we'll see where it goes, because we don't know what the other party is going to do. We don't know how they're going to react, but here's the different possibilities of what can happen, and we'll discuss what that would cost and how you would navigate that when that happens. Suddenly it becomes a much more small hill for them to overcome to get started with you, and it's an easy one for you to just provide the value that you need to provide in the most efficient manner right up front. So I've been doing this, but I haven't been calling it projects, and it makes so much sense when you use the word projects to instead of or in conjunction with phases. So I like that nugget that you shared. It's very much in line with something I've been trying to articulate. And maybe that helps somebody understand it just a little bit better. Folks, we're going to leave the link in the show notes, so you don't need to remember it. Just come back to the episode, click on the episode, and follow the link through to Tucker's website, to lawyale.com. Download that ebook if it interests you. Schedule a demo with them if that's the next step, or just give their software a whirl. Love it. I think this is a great conversation, and I'm really looking forward to what else we can do, Tucker, together. I think we're not done. I think this is an ongoing discussion, and I smell around two at some point.
That'd be great. No,
yeah,
I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for your time and generosity with our audience. And I think this is going to go down in the books as a favorite for everybody, because we really touched on something that people are in the back of their minds, that every lawyer is thinking about this. Whether you're sticking your feet and heels into the ground and saying, nope, I'm not on board, I'm not doing this, or you're looking to differentiate yourself and you're like, what can I do to differentiate myself? This is going to be talking to all of those people and everyone in between. So awesome stuff.
That's
well,
great.
Folks, there you have it. We've got another great guest interview in the bag. Join us again next Tuesday. I'll be here solo. And then, of course, we're going to have another guest interview for you on Thursday. We love ratings and reviews. We'd love it if you take a moment and rate and review the show. The same way that you live with ratings and reviews, that's where your referrals come from. We've kind of highlighted that today in a part of our conversation. That happens with me too on the podcast. People check us out, and if they see a bunch of ratings and reviews and they see a decent rating, they're going to come and listen. And the more listeners that we have, the more ammunition we have to bring you more and better content coming forward. So if you love the show, please show us that by clicking and rating the show in whatever podcast player you are playing in. Folks, that's a wrap. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Thank you for tuning into the Profit with Law podcast. Your feedback is extremely valuable to us, as well as helping us reach more people with this valuable content. Please leave us a rating and review in your favorite podcast directory. Join us again next time when we are back with even more strategies to profit with law.